and get started with Felicia and then go to Carol. All right, guys, thanks for joining. It's officially noon, but why don't we just give it 1 or 2 more minutes? We're waiting on one more panelist, and then we will officially kick it off. Hi, Carol. Can you hear us?
Hey, hi Kim, how are you?
Great, great. So we're just going to give everybody another 1 minute to get loaded, and then we'll get kicked off. Okay?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much for joining. All right, I see some students joining. We're about to get it kicked off. All right, guys, why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll have a couple more joining. Okay. They can come in, but welcome everyone to our Careers in Civil Engineering panel. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Kim Dolan with the Whiting School of Engineering. Today we have 3 alumni panelists: Carol Hayek, who's the Chief Technical Officer for CCL, Felicia Lewis, Chief Operating Officer at DS Architecture, and Maria Rivera Porada, Project Structural Engineer for the Pickering firm. So they're going to kick it off by sharing some information about their careers, their journeys, and then they'll touch on some skills and best practices for success in the civil engineering field. So each panelist will have the opportunity to share, and then we're going to be able to open up for question and answer from our students. So if you have a question, you can either type the question in the group chat, and I'll ask it to the panelists, or you can hit that raise your hand button and it will alert me that you have a question. I will call on you, and then you can introduce yourself and ask the question directly to your panelists. So without further ado, we'll start by hearing from our first panelist, Carol Hayek. Carol?
Hey, how are you, Kim? I'm just fixing I can see I have my Surface as well, so. I can see, I think there are some of my students actually on the call. I recognize some of the names. So some people from EP too, I think. So
yeah, this was open to all students, so we have a variety on the call.
All right. Well, that's great. And I like your background too. We need one of that. It's actually uplifting to see the campus. So okay, I'm going to start to talk a little bit about myself. So I graduated from Hopkins with an MS and a Master's of Science and a PhD. And currently I work for a company called CCL. It's specialized engineering solutions, but we focus a lot on pre-stressed concrete. And I'm the CTO for the group worldwide. I've been in that position for a long time, and I've worked for this company almost throughout my life. I did my PhD after working for a little bit. So I worked initially for 4 or 5 years and then went back and did my PhD. So I'm not the typical kind of student who went into graduate schools. In terms of my work, I do some R&D work, obviously. I do a lot of engineering more on the structural side. I sometimes also do kind of operational engineering if there's a repair project or a building that needs repair, and we want to look at how can we do stuff operationally, how can we like on site. So that will be kind of the site work that I do. I do a lot of trainings, technical strategic thinking for the group. I'm working on 4 patents right now on some new product that's going to come in kind of the engineering arena, some stuff actually that will be really cool, something that has never been done in buildings. My team is kind of spread out geographically. I have people in the UK where we have like a kind of a lab where we do our product development. I have mechanical engineers that work there and civil engineers as well. So that just to give you a quick brief of where am I today. If, I don't know, Kim, if we're supposed to talk about key items that shaped our career or something like that.
Yeah, Carol, so why don't you talk a little bit about how your Hopkins journey shaped your career, any advice that you have for the students?
Sorry, my daughter just popped in. Can you close the door?
No problem. We're all in the
What did you say?
life.
Oh, so how Hopkins shaped my career? Okay, great question. So I can tell you I'm one of those people who studied a lot in their life. After high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So all I knew is I like bridges and buildings. Every time I pass by something when we travel, it's like instead of people looking at this museum, I'll be looking, oh, look at this building. That's kind of awesome. So went to civil engineering, got my degree, my BS degree. I'm originally Lebanese. So I got my degree in Lebanon and then decided that's not enough, got an MBA afterwards. And then after working for a little bit, I figured that's, I need something a little bit more challenging. And this is where Hopkins came into play. So went to get my PhD. And I can tell you, I mean, I can talk forever. So I have to be mindful of time because I actually was, I got married right at my when started the PhD, got a kid. So I was pregnant while doing the PhD on campus. So you can only imagine. So Hopkins is like a second family to me because they were so accommodating. I don't think I could have done it without the support. And I'm not trying to sell Hopkins, but I'm really talking out of true experience and how I feel about it. So having a newborn on campus going with me to all classes. He's doing fantastic, by the way, got a 1590 on his SAT. So that explains, I tell him this is all the Hopkins kind of stuff that you got while you were a baby. So a lot of things. So beside academics, which I don't think there's any match anywhere really. I mean, it's very theoretical. It teaches you how to think and not just how to apply stuff. If you know the pyramid, when we talk about learning and how you can learn stuff, but to be creative, you have to get to the top of the pyramid. And not all schools will give you that. So I think having that at Hopkins expanded my field. Again, I went through I can tell you what I did at Hopkins, from financial instrument, catastrophe, financial bonds, from risk hedging to loss estimation for natural catastrophes, to building, I don't know, structural reliability curves on building structures. So it really, you get a full-blown degree on anything that you like to explore. So that's why it gives us the ability to expand and be creative. The other thing is the mentoring process. One of the key things when I finished my PhD was, should I go into research or go into like the academic kind of world or go into the applied world? And I can tell you the best advice I got was is my advisor actually at Hopkins. He was great. I mean, he actually said, I had worked for a little bit before going through my PhD. Kim, please stop me because if I'm going out of time, running.
You have a couple more minutes, Carol. You're
all right. Okay. So, and he went and said, wait a second. So what is your passion? I'm like, I don't, so, my passion, I have a kid who's 2 years old, I was still happy. And he said, do you see yourself in the academics? So I said, no, I mean, I worked in the industry. So I really like that aspect because it's much more hip and happening as opposed to academic research. It's a long-term project over 2-3 years time. And I remember his words. He said, so what's the dilemma? I was like, I did all this PhD work and not go in research. I kind of feel I wasted my time. And he said, you know what? Never let a degree shape your life. You shape the degree you get. And like, what does that mean? He said, if you like something, to be good at it, you have to have the passion. What a PhD will give you is the ability to think. And you can apply that to anything you want in this world. It doesn't mean that if you study this, it's kind of limiting you, the opposite. Like now you have the capability to think outside the box, which not a lot of people will have. That's what a degree will give you. And after that, I actually did not go to academia, not because, I mean, everybody has a passion somewhere, but I think that was kind of really helpful and it shaped my life. And to that, I mean, I can tell you that it expanded my capabilities at work. A lot of the opportunities that come probably wouldn't have gotten them if I didn't have that such a solid background. So
Yeah, let me just, Carol, that's a great, I want to plug Life Design for a second because, so I'm the interim director for the Wyden School of Engineering, and I'm also covering civil engineering right now.
right.
But that's a, you know, I wish early in my career someone had made me think holistically about kind of what I wanted out of life instead of taking, you know, a job I didn't want at first just because I wasn't really thinking, you know, long term about what made me happy and like what my passions were. So that's a great, you know, firsthand. I'm glad that they were so supportive and gave you that advice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I didn't do that, probably would have ended up not happy. And I truly believe the key to enjoying to succeeding, you have to enjoy what you do, because otherwise you'll be always looking, the grass is greener outside. You'll be always thinking, what if I did this? If it's something you like, you'll be much more reluctant to say, you know, that's it. That's what I want to do. That's what I enjoy. So it's really, so I really thank, I mean, they didn't say, no, you have to go this way or the other. They were open to giving any advice really that works. So.
Yeah, great. Kim, I think you're on mute.
Great, thank you so much. One of the games is unmuting and muting yourself.
Let me
So
unmute.
thank you so much, Carol. We'll have time to ask Carol questions at the end, but now we'll allow our next panelist to share. I'll kick it over to you, Felicia.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, afternoon. It all blurs together at this point, I think, a little bit. Full disclosure, Maria and I talk daily or so. We both graduated together, class of '99. So our experiences are similar but different. Both of our husbands are also Hopkins grads in the BME department. So this has been a crazy ride since graduating, both for my career and for my husband's career. So graduated '99 civil structural and played basketball for the women's team at Hopkins for the 4 years that I was there. So my experience was a little different than a lot of my classmates in that I did not do research, but I got to go on 4 plane trips a year. So I don't know, depending on how you want to design your life, that for me was a great thing at that point. I ended up at Hopkins because I wanted to play basketball, and I thought when I was growing up that I was going to be an architect. From the time I was very, very young, that was what my goal was. But as a high school student whose parents had not gone to college, my dad was working for the Army Corps of Engineers at that time. And I had initially thought about art school, and then my parents said, you're not going to say, do you want fries with that for the rest of your life? So being, you know, the typical good at math and science, but also had a penchant for art as well. I thought architecture was where I would go. Now, the caveat to that is no coach would let me do architecture and play basketball at the same time. They said it just doesn't work with the amount of studio that you have to do. So my path veered there, and I ended up at Hopkins where I could play basketball and get a structural engineering degree, which at the time I'm like, oh, they're similar, they're enough. Not so much, but that's okay. So my time at Hopkins in civil engineering, to your point about learning how to think, I think that was the most important piece of education that I took away from being at Hopkins, is the ability to understand the world and make connections that we learned as a result of our coursework. So upon graduating from Hopkins, I worked in Baltimore for a year or so as a structural engineer. or EIT, you're not allowed to call yourself an engineer. And the majority of my work during that first year was checking shop drawings, which that has changed significantly. So for the students there, it was, we were working on a hospital, and I checked every single beam and connection for the job. It was typical intern work at that point, but gave me an appreciation for the scale of the building. And there were some other design opportunities, but that first year was really just grunt work, to be frank. And that was fine, I was learning. At the end of that first year or so, my husband and I decided, he was still my boyfriend at that time, that we were going to find a place where he could get into biomedical engineering, because he took a job at that time as a mechanical engineer, essentially working for Amtote International, which is in Baltimore. So he had his quarter life crisis, and we knew that we were going to be together, and I could work anywhere, whereas the biomedical world is much different. It's smaller. So he set off to figure out what he was going to do when he grew up, and I did simultaneously. We thought that we were going to move to Indiana, so I applied to Notre Dame to get it was going to be like a master's in architecture, really off the course. Long story short, he did not get the job in Indiana, and I felt like I should run out engineering before I ditched it completely. So we ended up in Florida, in Jacksonville, and that was an exciting time because they were building everywhere. And the way I found that job was a job site placard that had the name of the engineering company on it. And I called and said, hey, are you looking for somebody? And I got hired there and spent the next 9 years working at it was called Atlantic Engineering Services, and they have an office in Pittsburgh and one in Jacksonville. And from what I understand, another Hopkins grad works there now. So that's pretty cool. The plot twists with the crash of 2008. Simultaneously to that, our first son was born 12/12/06, and my husband decided to join a startup in Akron, Ohio. So lots going on at that time. I had been working full-time at the consultant firm up until that point. When the baby was born, I still was working full-ish time until we moved to Akron, at which point I could not find a job. It was dark days there. And so I had a photography business on the side, always doing something. It's just, so I swung a little bit to that life design and did the artsy part for a while and learned how to run a business and how to file taxes and not go to jail. So I decided to give engineering one last try and worked for a small company in Akron part-time. It was not very exciting work, to be honest with you. We designed a lot of metal stairs. It was, yeah, not, my greatest accomplishment there is having a wind tunnel test done on a structure, because the code books that we were looking at for cold formed did not have the case that we wanted. So I made them do a wind tunnel test. So that was exciting. While I was there, I was supposed to be working on marketing as well, while also being 100% billable. It did not work. But I met a gentleman during my first week who would become my future employer. So when we finally broke up with that company doing the metal, essentially it did feel like a breakup. It was weird. They had, yeah, I don't even want to go into the details, but I ended up working for an architecture firm next because they needed somebody to do QA and QC. And I love a good red pen and marking up drawings. That was, coordination was one of my favorite things to do. Maria's laughing. So I worked for them for about 9 months, and then their jobs dried up, and I was hired by my current firm as a project assistant. So the thing about having an engineering degree is that you have a lot of experiences, and I had a lot of coordination experience with working with architects. So in rounding back into the world of architecture, where I originally thought I was going to land, this was an interesting opportunity to go and work as a project assistant. Lo and behold, 9 months or so into that job, the woman who was the chief operating officer left, and I moved into her shoes. So the joke is it took me 9 months to take over. So I've been in that position for about 3 years, and there is no reason I should have ever been a chief operating officer of anywhere. But I think it's the Hopkins degree and the ability to have a passion for learning. We could figure out anything. It's just getting through the initial fear of learning it. So I've done all sorts of crazy things. We run on a system of business called EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Gino Wickman wrote the book Traction, and that's where all of this comes from. But it's definitely segmenting your business and understanding what your issues are and identifying those issues and then solving them. Because a lot of issues aren't really issues, they're minor complaints, or they're not as big of problems as one would assume them to be. The people portion of leadership, I would say, is the most difficult. Everybody has a lot of emotions that you're dealing with, and I think when you're on a job site, when I was in Florida, we did a lot of job site work and learning how to communicate with the people on the job site and then relaying that information back to the office or the architects of what was going on in the field is something that I think is often underestimated whenever you're in an engineering degree. Is you're going to spend so much time communicating, and being able to do that efficiently and poignantly to be able to get your point across is absolutely critical. So I want to piggyback on what Carol said. She said, never let a degree shape your life. So I really feel like that has been my path, in that my degree, it has influence on my path, but it has not determined my path. A couple of other things. This past year, Goldman Sachs has a class for called 10,000 Small Businesses, to keep that lifelong learning going. I attended that, which who knew that I would end up being the one doing our QuickBooks account, because we had to let people go because of layoffs and whatnot. These are things that you don't expect to have to do, but you definitely learn, and I gained a lot of appreciation and understanding as a result of that class. A couple of other things before I let Maria talk. Revit. Don't let anybody tell you don't learn Revit. Revit is the future. The most number one thing you can do to make yourself marketable is know Revit, or at least have some inkling. CAD is leaving and Revit is taking over. I don't know if that's been your experience in courses, is learning to work in the Revit field, but we are 99% Revit, and any of the other engineers and architects that I talk to here in the Cleveland area are similar. The last thing would be ACE. So our community is very involved in ACE, which is Architecture, Construction, and Engineering Mentoring Program. I am on the board here in Akron, and we work with students to go through essentially a senior design project as high school seniors, juniors, whoever wants to come. And that is an incredible program for you when you graduate, to not only network, but to give back to local students. wherever it is that you may land. I think that's all I've got for now. Like Carol, I could talk forever, but I'll let Maria add something.
I have a quick follow up. That's fantastic. Do you think that do you think that when you had to set up your own business for the photography, that experience shaped your view to where you weren't afraid to take on this, or like you felt confident that you could be a chief operating officer, or like was that kind of the building blocks that you built like, I mean, it was kind of an unexpected twist in your story, but I feel like, having to figure out how to run a small business, you are responsible for everything. So,
Yes.
you really have to figure it out.
Well, the shoebox full of receipts are still in my basement someplace. I think I can finally burn those at this point. I will no longer be audited. Part of my engineering career was this deep commitment to being as right as I could. I used to have nightmares about buildings falling down. So that's a good portion of why I am no longer engineering, is the responsibility for me was so overwhelming that I needed to do something different. Not that that's everybody's mindset, but for me, that was it. So I think that financial responsibility that you're talking about. So I started the small business because I loved art and I wanted to take pictures, and I wanted to get paid for doing that and be able to write off my camera equipment. Like there's so many, it satisfied my need at that time in my life to have an art outlet, because we were working so hard at the engineering firm that I was at. I guess I would say my husband was a big influence. He's like, Felicia, you went to Hopkins. How many people don't go to Hopkins and they can run their own business? Let's be honest about things. So he'll often do the curve and be like, you're obviously on this end, you can do it. So I think support from your family and those that you're with is an incredibly important part of having the confidence to try anything. So I would say he's been very influential in that, just try it. How bad can you screw it up?
Great, thanks so much, Felicia. So I'll kick it over to Maria to share.
Hello, everyone. So as Felicia said, we've known each other for forever. Graduated in '99 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Hopkins. Early on, I had a lot of interest when I was growing up. One of them was actually writing. I can remember wanting to be an author early on in my life, and similar to Felicia's parents, my parents, suggested I try something else. When I got to high school, math and science were strong suits, and I was also a very linear thinker. I like lists, I like a plan, I like to execute, I like a solution. So it seemed like a natural fit to go into civil engineering, and I did appreciate architecture, maybe not to the degree that Felicia did, but it seemed like a natural fit. So I went to Hopkins already with the idea that I was going to get my master's afterwards and land a job at a design firm and become, a design expert, design engineer in buildings. So I had everything planned out. The 4 years at Hopkins were, as you all know, grueling. You guys have done it, have gone through it. But I have to say, I think I made the best friendships, relationships with faculty as well as students. And I felt like it really prepared me for life overall, not just in the technical sense of a career, but also just in problem solving. Again, like we've been talking, being able to confront a problem, whether it's at work or it's in your life, and be able to break it down into pieces and to tackle it one piece at a time, try various solutions, and not get overwhelmed by the enormity sometimes of the challenges that we're faced with. So after graduating from Hopkins, I went to get my master's at Cornell, still in structural engineering. And from there, I started off at Parsons Brinkerhoff in Pittsburgh as an entry-level engineer. That first year, again, as with most engineers, it was load calculations, very simple, some shop drawing work, very simple work, not very exciting, but it sort of introduced you to how things, the basic gist of how projects were run. From there, my husband and I moved to Baltimore. And again, I was looking for a job. My whole life, I thought buildings, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to design buildings. And I interviewed with a firm that did waterfront structures, no buildings at all. The majority of their work was for the Port of Baltimore. So a lot of it was berths, piers, working with concrete, working with wood, steel. And it was not quite, when I interviewed, it wasn't quite what I had in mind. Didn't seem like what I wanted to do. But the office manager had a degree from Hopkins, and they actually weren't even looking for a structural engineer at the time. But because of our connection with me having a degree from Hopkins and him, he decided to bring me on anyway. And I worked for them for about 5 or 6 years. Some of the most interesting work, honestly, I've worked at 4 different firms at this point, and I think of all of them, I think it's been my favorite job. It was challenging, but it was different. Every project was different. There was no cookie cutter project at all. Every situation was a repair or a unique need. So I learned a lot, and I got a lot of exposure to how things were built. There was a lot of, every time a project went under construction, we had to be out in the field several times a week. And I cannot emphasize how important that is. I think you learn a lot more by seeing how things are built, seeing the challenges that they encounter in the field, than by just sitting at your desk designing. So that was a wonderful experience. After that, I had, 3 children in 5 years. And so I took some time off and to raise the kids. I was off for about 5 years, and then I started up again. I worked for a year at another local Baltimore firm, and then we moved to Memphis, which is where I'm at right now. And I worked for 4 years for a firm that actually did building design, primarily commercial and industrial buildings. And I just actually left that firm not long before the COVID situation hit. So I'm kind of looking for the next opportunity. I actually applied back in, I believe it was November, for a position at Life Design at Hopkins for the assistant position, assistant director of civil engineering. I knew it was kind of like I probably wasn't the best person for the job, considering, first of all, that I'm here in Memphis and not there. But I'm at a point where I want to pivot. I picked up the book Life Designing Your Life that was mentioned at one of our alumni outreach meetings, and it has been everything that Carol and Felicia both talked about finding your passion and not letting the degree dictate exactly what it is that you have to do. I feel I'm at that point in my life right now. So I'm not sure where this journey will take me. I'm currently trying to learn Revit better. As Felicia said, Revit is pretty much the future. So I'm trying to sharpen my skills right now in this downtime, and seeing what's next. So in terms of advice for you guys, be open to possibilities. You may think you have, you may think you know what you want to do. You may think you might have it all planned out, but unexpected opportunities, be open to them, explore them. Don't be afraid to deviate, to take a detour, because you never know where those will lead you. You never know what is out there that you didn't even know you had an interest in. So I would say, don't be in a rush to kind of hurry up and finish, or hurry up and get to the next step. Hurry up and get your PE, hurry up and get that next degree. I think exploring and really forming relationships is important.
Great, thanks so much, Maria. We've had a chance to hear from all of our panelists.
Kim?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say something that I forgot.
Yeah, hey, Carol.
Just a disclosure, my husband is a Hopkins too, but we actually knew each other before Hopkins. So it seems like Hopkins is a matching also. But So we got married right before Hopkins, but I actually, so he started the company that we're working in today. So he started the company and had to move to Boston. So that's a part of my life that I didn't speak about. And as I said, I can, because we've gone through a lot of stuff through our career. But he's also at Hopkins. He had his master's degree in civil engineering, but then started the company. And then I moved to Boston afterwards, but then the company was partially bought. And now we're part of this big international group where he is the COO for the Americas. I'm the CTO for the group worldwide. So just a disclosure. And I've heard this stuff. So I heard, Maria and Felicia talk. I say I have a few things that really good advice. One, hard work pays off. Because some people think, to piggyback on what Maria said, don't rush and don't get discouraged. You do your work. It's not about how much your employer sees. At the end, what you do is for you. It's all the time. If people only look at, okay, how much am I getting and what's my salary and what's this guy, you'll be wasting your time while everybody else is accumulating knowledge and exposure. Do your hard work. If you're not happy, leave. But don't work because you're not being rewarded. So whatever you do, it's in your head. You'll take it with you. Nobody can take that from you. The other thing, don't be afraid of challenge. As I said, we left our country to come for a better life. We were so worried initially. What if we're not happy? We're both Lebanese. I think we're doing, we're very happy today where we are in life. My husband went in for the PhD program, decided there's no way he will do research. He's not meant for it, started the company, and also got partially bought. So, which tells you we did something good. So there's a lot of things in life. So don't be afraid of challenge, and always question your path. Am I on the right path? Should I be doing, am I giving it all I got? If you're not giving all you've got, then chances are you don't really like what you're doing. I think these are, two key things that will help you. And don't be afraid to ask. Just ask for a mentor. Sometimes people outside your environment, not your family, not somebody who can be really objective into helping you. So
I would say don't be afraid of failure either.
Yeah.
By a lot of standards, I am a tragic Hopkins failure in that I never got my PE. I sat for the test 2 weeks after my grandmother passed away, who was a huge part of my life. And I think I needed a 70 and I got a 68 type thing. And at that point, I took it as a sign from the universe that I was miserable working at the job that I was at that point, because we were putting in so many hours. And I failed, and I was like, I have to make a change at some point here. It took a little while. I don't think that change comes immediately for most people, but like Maria was saying, that pivot point of understanding and learning from your failure, I think is an incredibly important part of this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't have a PE either, Felicia, but because I work more in research, so I never felt I needed, but I can tell you that I may do it one day. I mean, if I see that there's a need. I never took actually the test, just I don't feel like studying anymore. So one thing, I'm heavily involved on a lot of association. I'm actually the chair of a new post-tensioning building code by ACI. So I'm the chair of the committee. I'm the chair of the building design code for the Post-Tensioning Institute. I'm on the technical advisory board for the Institute. So we were only 12 people that we review every single document out there. So you could still accomplish plenty of stuff depending on where you want to be and what your work kind of requires.
Thank you guys so much. At this point, we'll have an opportunity to let our students ask some questions. Does anybody have a question?
I have a question. I'm a junior at Hopkins. I'm studying environmental engineering, not civil, but yeah, kind of what you're talking about, like, don't be afraid of change. Like, I definitely have that fear of like change. Like in my ideal situation, like I would find the perfect company and like work for them and like not change at all. But like you guys all like had a couple different like jobs and stuff. I guess like, is it actually like very hard to transition like to a different firm, and like is that like actually like kind of scary or like cause like anxiety to like change job and have to like, you know, make new friends at the firm and all of that? Or is it like kind of just like more of a growing experience and like you build on top of what you already learned and like it's not that hard?
I can kind of speak to that. So I hate change. I'm like it takes me years and years and years to change anything. So when I started this job here in Memphis in buildings, I'd never done any building design before. It had been, like I said, pretty much waterfront structures. And so my assumptions, you know, kind of the magnitude of loads and members that I was used to was very different. With it, well, I guess it was still all within structural engineering, so the basic principles applied. But usually people are very understanding, and your team, well, if you're working with a good team, they're willing to help you get past that learning curve, and they want to see you succeed because it makes the team succeed, and it makes projects move smoothly. So I think the fear of change is bigger than actually going through it. I think the biggest step is making that decision to change. So I totally understand where you're coming from of being afraid to do it, but I think it's not, like I said, the fear I think is bigger than actually taking the step.
Yeah, I can add on to that. I mean, I've threatened Maria a million times, like, you need to leave wherever she was because she was not in a good place. Now, she does it on her own times, but having a friend or somebody who has that mentor that Carol was alluding to, it could be a friend, it could be somebody of just you're understanding what that other person is going through, and you can see how deeply unhappy they are. So I think the possibility of being in a better place a lot of times overcomes that fear. Something else to consider is we may look like grown-ups, but we don't know what the hell we're doing. I have 2 kids, a husband, a dog, a cat, E-I-E-I-O. And some days I'm like, how in the world am I entrusted to take care of these humans and a company and all of my team members? Like, we're just figuring it out day by day, and we don't have all the answers. We just have more experience and more, I think it's just more experiences to draw on, more mistakes, some successes here and there, but more battle wounds. So people want to be friendly too, 99% of the time. Especially I've found women in engineering and construction generally are like really chatty and friendly and want to help you out. And so I wouldn't be afraid to reach out to those people. And it's like joining a new school, right? So the first day of school, you're really nervous because you don't know anybody there. And then you get there and you find friendships within those different companies. And to Carol's point earlier, she was talking about compensation versus being happy where you are. You may not make as much money at company A as you will at B, but the culture is something that you can see yourself living in. Like an extra little bit of change here and there versus really liking your team, getting out of bed in the morning and being able to go to work, and these are your people and they have your back. That is incredibly empowering and makes your day so much better.
Great. Thank you guys so much. We had a question that came in via the chat. It is COVID related. So the question is, what have the changes that you've seen either at your company or in the industry during this time? And then many of our students have lost internships opportunities for the summer. what can they do this summer to take advantage of time and make it themselves more desirable for employees? And then lastly, are any of your companies or companies that you are aware of hiring at this time?
I could take that one. I think it depends where you are in the country. I think I live in in Maryland, next to DC. I think we haven't seen a slowdown yet. All the sites are still open. Our offices are still open. I work from home even before COVID-19, just because my team is kind of spread out around the world and I travel quite a bit. So I go to the office usually twice a week for my own sanity, but I work from home a lot. That was even before COVID-19. And this was the way most industries were going anyways. I think we just got a boost in transition right now. Most of our engineers are working from home throughout, around the world, everybody, except for the manufacturing part. So our plants are still open where we actually fabricate. We have a plant in Jessup, Maryland, which is halfway between Baltimore and DC. Everybody's still going. We haven't closed. So we haven't seen a really, knock on wood, such a downturn as of now. The concern is what will happen 2-3 months from now, once, because there's a lag in the construction industry, is that, for example, I can tell you travel and residential, will those be hit tremendously that they're not going to recover? So let's say Marriott was planning to build, 2 new hotels. Are they going to still build it while their profit are down tremendously for this quarter? So there will be, we don't know, but there could be a slowdown later on. So in a way, construction, all the projects that we have on the ground today are still continuing because they have the money. They already had the financing. So we're going to see whether there's a lag. So in terms of, I don't think it changed much, but I think most engineers are working from home, talking to a lot of my friends locally and anywhere really around the world. Most engineers are working from home. The people who work structural engineering, most site people are still going to sites. I know Europe hasn't closed yet. Some parts of Southern Europe has closed, but more Northern Europe, Scandinavia, they're still working. So that's in a nutshell of what's going on in the industry. I'm hoping that infrastructure will kick in, but because I think that's the only way usually to revive economies is by throwing money at infrastructure. So we're hoping that from a construction perspective, it's not gloom and doom. So hopefully you guys will, it might be a tough few months, but eventually things will have will come back. I'm usually an optimistic person. I'm not a pessimistic, so I'm hoping this one will hold true. And there will be a lot of manufacturing, hopefully a lot of new plants, a lot of things, because there's some talks that we will bring manufacturing back, some of the manufacturing. So there will be some industrial buildings going up. In terms of what to do over the summer, if you can't find a job, I think it might be hard. It really depends. I think nobody's going to hire today because nobody knows how the economy is going. So unfortunately, I don't think anybody can promise you work. But I would think once the next 2 months are kind of gone, we will have a good idea of how the next months will be shaped. If we're going to see a recession or just going back up, which I think that's going to be. I think it's not going to be a recession. I truly, from the cues I hear from people, that it's not going to be a downturn. There will be a slowdown, but eventually things will go back up. So if you're looking for a job now or an internship, it might be a little bit tough this summer just because this is the time frame for it where you would apply. I would suggest you do trainings if you have the time. Take a course at Hopkins. You can do a summer if you're still a student. Take a summer course, take advantage of that and finish your degree faster than what you would. Take a minor in something or even training. All associations do trainings. They talk about Revit, Felicia talked about Revit. Take a Revit training. Take, I know, for example, ACI, PTI, ASCE, they all have trainings on some topic. And that could be very helpful if you want to go to the applied world, because this is those, when you take these trainings, these are applied, these are not theoretical. Hopkins will teach you the theoretical stuff. training will give you really applied work. So when you're applying for a job, you kind of have a head start over other people applying because you kind of have seen what the real world requires. So, that's it.
I can speak to where we're at. So generally architecture is ahead of the engineers in a lot of things. And some of our clients include hospitals such as the Cleveland Clinic and some of the other local hospitals here in the Cleveland area. And all hospital projects except essential, one or two, are being put on hold until further notice. So they're not canceling them. We're just in a holding pattern. Some of the other projects, we work with higher education and the retail business, and you guys are probably too young. If you've ever seen Wayne's World and they're playing street hockey and a car comes down the road and they're like, game off. And then the car leaves and they're game back on. And I feel like that's our projects at this point. It's game off, game on. It varies day to day. So we are seeing, it's not a no, but it's a, we don't know when things are going to get back up and moving for a lot of our projects. As far as internships go, we have told all of our applicants that we are not able to provide them the internship that we feel they deserve remotely. It's very, very difficult to welcome a new team member onto a remote team for the hands-on learning and mentorship that they need. So, you know, for us in particular, we've told them nothing over the summer, and we'll reevaluate as the fall comes up. You know, we were actually looking to hire a couple of folks right before all of this went down. And now, because everything is going on hold, that has changed. As far as, you know, over the summer, if you are able to volunteer at your local food bank or any sort of organization that is reaching out to folks during this time, the life skills and the interpersonal skills that you will have the opportunity to develop during the climate that we're currently in could be incredibly valuable. The thing about working in construction is there's often conflict, and being able to have empathy and working through problems is incredibly important to your success in the engineering and design. So any sort of experience that you could get would look great to an employer or future employer. So instead, you know, I couldn't get a job, but instead I was doing ASCE classes and Revit classes, and I volunteered at my insert your favorite cause here. All of those can really help influence their final decision making, as opposed to somebody who sat around binging on Netflix for the next 6 months.
I would agree with everything Carol and Felicia said, because I think those things make you look like a team player. You're not just, you know, in it for what you get out of it, but you are interested in putting in the effort and investing in your community, investing in the industry. So that's something that employers, I think, would really appreciate.
Great, thank you all. Any other questions from our students?
Yeah, I've got a question, actually sort of a multi-part question, but my name's Evan. I'm a graduating senior, I guess, in the master's program for environmental engineering. I currently work for the US Navy, which actually we are getting really heavy on Revit and like SysML and all that sort of system modeling language stuff. So I would highly encourage everybody to do that. And actually it's very happy to hear that industry is using it. Sometimes our tools don't always align, but definitely the military is building up big on that in case anybody's interested. But I had some questions about sort of industry in general. I know we talked about moving forward during the COVID, but I mean, obviously there's hope for a future world outside of that. Didn't know, hopefully, if anything, in a particular light in environmental, but it sounds like you guys are a little bit more strictly civil, but I mean, whatever, it's all kind of the same thing. If you had any sort of general temperature on where things were moving. I know you guys referenced some, obviously the Revit and some ASCE training classes that you can maybe take. I don't know if you guys have any good information on some like maybe free or open source sources of that training that we can be doing. But just kind of where you guys are thinking things are going there. And then also totally separate, but you guys were talking about a lot about changing jobs, changing careers. It sounds like some of you had sort of all kinds of personal situations going on at the same time. I mean, definitely as myself, I was in the engineering for professionals program, so I'm already a working engineer. And I would assume in a lot of situations that other employed engineers potentially are the sort of the main breadwinner of their family, and kind of trying to figure out not only just mentally when it's okay to jump ship, but like timing that, financially and sort of balancing off all the other stakeholders, personally in this case, and sort of when to know you're ready in that light, and then also like professionally when you think you've potentially learned enough to change careers. As I said, obviously I'm just about to graduate with a master's, but all my working professional experience is in an entirely different field. I'm working as a control systems engineer now. So kind of trying to figure out how to leverage my experience that I've been gaining in the professional world, but is not particularly in the environmental realm, how to leverage that into, potential career moving forward. Anyway, sorry, I know that was a lot.
Should I answer? I didn't quite get the last part of your question about the personal and balance, to be honest, but I can start answering the first. So I just wrote down, you talked about the training and where you can get stuff during the summer, right? So I can tell you that most associations have free membership for students. And if you want, just text me. I can send you some of the associations. They all have free membership for students, and you can take, so some of them have classes where you can take for free and you can get PDH for them. So, and you can say, I've done this training. So it might not be a personal one-on-one kind of training where you sit but they do have registered webinars. Not webinar, kind of EP, right? So if you did I think you're doing EP as part-time. So if you, right? Yeah, so they have like just things that you can take, and there could be maybe a test here and there. So I don't know exactly how it works, but they do have free stuff that you can take PDH for. Now PDH are for professional engineers, but if you don't have the license, it's fine. You can say on your resume, I've done this, taken this webinar from ASCE, from ACI, from PTI, so whichever it is. I think that would be really helpful, and it will not cost you anything. I really tell all my students, take advantage while you're a student, because then they'll make you pay for all the stuff while you can take it for free today. And they usually have a grace period of 1 year, most of them, after you graduate. Well, they will let you, but afterwards you have, and these are quite expensive. If you do one association, that's fine, but most of the time you would need a couple or three to get all your stuff. So that's on what you can get in terms of training. On the environmental, I actually did quite a bit of work. So I'm not an environmental engineer, but I've done quite a bit of work on environmental for structures. I don't know if you're like EPDs, does that mean anything to you? Environmental declaration, product declaration for buildings? Do you study that stuff? Okay, so in terms of, I'm talking from an environmental for civil engineers, and maybe Maria and Felicia have this, so this is more on the architecture side than really what a structural engineer would do. I just loved this. I went on my, you said how you know you can change. So every time when I feel bored, I go and do a new topic, write a paper on it. So that would be a way out from your day-to-day things. So on structures, I can tell you that most structures today will need to have some kind of a certificate on the environmental side. And they are really pushing hard on having ratings. So you can have silver, gold, blah, blah, blah. Bronze label. So it's all go onto the environmental stuff. I've worked a little bit with the EPA on wind turbines. So to look at the energy and all that kind of stuff. So there's quite a bit of work coming up on the energy side for environmental engineers on the buildings from a structural perspective. So a lot of buildings now are requiring some environmental rating. There are associations that do that. And there's quite a bit of work because in the structural community, there's very few people who know about this. They don't actually know what's the CO2, how you can get the carbon emission, the green gas, how, you know, water resources. So there's protocols on how to calculate all this. And then you have the energy side where we need engineers and environmental to look at the energy output and look at wind turbines and how you could harness wind and stuff. So maybe that will be something. And the other part of your question, maybe I was distracted, but if you can repeat that, or if somebody else.
No, that's okay. I sort of started rambling there. And I think that most of your other answers, everyone else's answers, thank you to Maria and Felicia as well, covered a lot of that. I think really it was a personal question, I guess, but I don't know if anybody caught it and would like to comment on it, but it was on the career change kind of thing.
If you want to look at environmental change, there's some companies, so look at the structure side, because there's not a lot of engineers who take that route from the civil engineering community. So there's a few companies like Athena, like I know also ASTM even had started some protocol for environmental stuff for structures. Look at EPA, and you can also look at a PhD even. I don't know if Hopkins offers something like this, but there's a lot to do on the energy kind of structural / environmental kind of things. That would be quite a bit of specialty. A lot of people follow that out. So could be opportunities there too.
Yeah, so we're about out of time. I'll let Felicia go quickly and then we'll close things down.
I was going to say USGBC, who is the body in charge of LEED. You can get your LEED certification. You could also look at WELL, W-E-L-L, building certification. So that's starting to look at how people interact in buildings, which the environment would play a role in that. Here in Cleveland, we have a 2030 initiative, as well as AIA is doing the 2030 challenge. All of those are environmental initiatives going on. As far as the career change and the stakeholders, I think you can get our information from Kim and Maria and I and Carol as well. Any of us you could certainly follow up with, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our 3 panelists for joining us and all of you guys for participating. This concludes today's session. As the panelists mentioned, we'll be following up to share their contact information. Thank you. We'll give them a round of applause. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and thanks again.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Nice talking to you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.